The Commanders' rushing attack, once considered a strength, has faltered in recent weeks with Brian Robinson Jr. struggling and the offensive line failing to regain its earlier form. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com, and I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. You can also find me helping with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team this year. I thank you for coming through for today's episode, everydayers of the program. I appreciate you, especially for coming through every single day. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this episode, in which we're going to talk about Cornelius Lucas being among the most critical Washington Commanders in Week 17. We're going to talk about forcing the Atlanta Falcons to try to fly and get off the ground in Northwest Stadium. But we're going to kick it all off with talking about why the rushing game needs to get back on track, and the sooner the better. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. The Commanders' rushing attack, once considered a strength of this team, considering the primary way this offense really got rolling, has really not been all that effective in recent weeks. Brian Robinson Jr. has struggled. The offensive line is failing to regain struggling to regain its previous form earlier this season. And for us, that is the first must-do that the Washington Commanders have this weekend in order to beat the Atlanta Falcons. So every Thursday, we go over our three must-dos of the week. These three things, the way I've got it designed is my intent is for you to be able to look at this and say, if the Washington Commanders do these three things, they will get a win. Not could, will get a win. And the first one this week, not necessarily the most important, but the first one this week is establishing that ground game, reestablishing that ground game without having to rely on Jayden Daniels to do it, because Jayden Daniels certainly is a weapon all on his own. But as every team that's ever had a mobile athletic quarterback will tell you, you can't have a running game that is only your quarterback. The Washington Commanders are currently 9th right now in the National Football League in running back rushing yards with 954 of them. So that's not all that bad. Yards per carry, 8th best in the league overall, 4.6 yards per carry on average. However, in the past 4 games, that running back yards per carry average has dropped to 16th in the league, 4.3 yards, and the team is 18th in total running back rushing yards. So it kind of shows you the impact that Jayden Daniels has on this rushing attack, which is, again, a good thing, but you definitely want to get that running game going with your running backs once again. In the past 2 weeks specifically, the Washington Commanders are 28th in the NFL in running back rushing yards and dead last, averaging 2.6 yards per carry. That is not what we're used to seeing out of Brian Robinson, not what we were used to seeing out of this Washington Commanders rushing attack. The Washington Commanders rushed for 113 yards, averaged 4.7 yards per carry as a team against the Eagles, which sounds okay. But the problem with that, Brian Robinson, 10 carries, 24 yards, 2.4 yards per carry. The rest of that, essentially, Jayden Daniels, Jeremy McNichols, Chris Rodriguez got into the act a little bit, but basically it was B-Rob and Jayden Daniels. It was the 4th time this season that win over the Philadelphia Eagles where Brian Robinson has averaged less than 3 yards per carry. That is a career high. He has never averaged less than 3 yards per carry in a single game this many times in a single season until now. So that's kind of the state of the running game. We've asked Darren Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury was asked about it, the importance of getting that ground game going. You love having Jayden, but you don't want to have Jayden be not just the catalyst of the offensive line or offensive passing game, but also the offensive rushing game. Jayden Daniels has been putting that cape on more as of late, which you love seeing as a leadership from a development standpoint. But any team, again, that has a rushing quarterback and athletic quarterback will tell you, you absolutely need to have that next dimension where you have that running back. You just look at the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson and what they did to go get Derrick Henry. It's not that their rush game hasn't been one of the higher ranked or one of the higher statistical producing run games in the NFL over recent years, but too much of it was on the shoulders of Lamar Jackson. They went out and they got Derrick Henry, and their hope is when they get into the postseason especially, Derrick Henry will carry a lot more of that workload than Lamar Jackson has had to over the course of his career. Robinson has also averaged more than 4 yards per carry 5 times this season. The Commanders are undefeated in all of those games, and they've scored 40 points or more in 3 of those games. So clearly this team still runs best when he can get his ground game going. So look for Brian Robinson Jr. hopefully, and this offensive line hopefully to get those things back on track, because it's not all on B-Rob. I think that's an important part to talk about when we have this conversation, is to not just put it on the shoulders of Brian Robinson Jr., because that certainly would not be fair to B-Rob. It wouldn't be fair to any of the other individual running backs. The offensive line certainly has to do a better job. Dan Quinn talked about it earlier this week, wanting his offensive line to get back to just playing fast, right? We talked about this in training camp, in the preseason. Go out there, fire off the line of scrimmage, understand your responsibility, and don't just overthink it. Don't go out there and say, well, if this guy does this, I got to do that. Or if this guy takes this angle, I got to take this angle. No, like, just get out to your responsibility, get to your spot, get to your marker, get to your waypoint, whatever you want to call it. And whoever's in front of you, just put it on him, man. Just put it on him as physically dominant as you possibly can. Get that guy off the point of attack. That's what they were doing earlier in the season. We go back to some of these earlier games where Brian Robinson Jr. was really able to kind of come out and set the tone and really establish a platform for Jayden Daniels to then kind of go perform off of. Those were those games. And I remember talking to those O-line after the game. They're dog tired and they're beat up, but they were happy. You come out here and you see some of these other games and where they're not having as much success, and they're certainly happy that the team won, right? But they're not as happy. They don't have that kind of we contributed to the team's success as much as they did before. You can see it, you can sense it when you talk to them, and it's unfortunate because you definitely want it for them. They certainly work hard to try to get it. So Dan Quinn talking about they just need to get back out there, fire off the line of scrimmage, play fast, play aggressive, play incredibly hungry up at the front line, the point of attack. Might be harder a little bit this week to get that going with Trent Scott or Cornelius Lucas. Rather, Cornelius Lucas expected to start in place of Andrew Wylie, who is going to miss this game with a groin injury. Trent Scott could potentially get some reps in there as well. He'll be the swing tackle, eligible offensive lineman coming in for certain games, certain plays as well. And of course, a lot of people still continue to ask, where's Ben Sinnott and why isn't his role expanding? And I continue to get very excited at the idea of Ben Sinnott being used as an H-back, fullback type, put him in the backfield, put him in as a tight end, whatever you want to do, just get him involved in the play as a blocker or as a receiver. We'll see if that kind of becomes part of the game plan too with Andrew Wylie out of this game. We'll see what they decide to do against the Atlanta Falcons this weekend in a matchup where if the Washington Commanders win, they will clinch a playoff spot. Of course, they could have a playoff spot by the time they even kick off if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose to the Carolina Panthers, and the Washington Commanders will have already clinched a playoff spot, but there's still potentially some other stuff on the line. Again, we'll know by the time this game kicks off because of the Philadelphia Eagles lose to the Dallas Cowboys, which Dallas Cowboys no longer have CeeDee Lamb. Philadelphia Eagles not going to be playing with Jalen Hurts, so we'll see how big of an impact those things have in the game. But if the Dallas Cowboys find a way to upset the Eagles and the Washington Commanders beat the Atlanta Falcons, then the NFC East Division title is going to go all the way down to Week 18. The Philadelphia Eagles would still have the advantage. If they beat the Giants, they would be the division champions. But if they were losing to the Giants, obviously a little bit less likely. Likely Jalen Hurts would be back if that situation were to arise. But if it happened and the Washington Commanders could beat the Dallas Cowboys in Week 18, the Washington Commanders would be division champs. So still a lot to talk about here as we get towards the end of the regular season in preparation for the postseason. But to beat the Falcons, the Commanders are going to need to stifle running backs Bijan Robinson, and Tyler Allgeier, exploit Michael Penix's short-range passing game, and score early to force Atlanta into a passing situation they don't want to be in. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Game Time. Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season, and that means bringing people together at live events, bringing you and your people together at live events, and making the experience that much better. And Game Time has an awesome feature to help you do that called Game Time Picks, which makes picking tickets for live events even easier than before. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets on your own. My Game Time Picks right now include tickets to see the Commanders host those Atlanta Falcons this weekend for $98. The Washington Wizards, hosting the New York Knicks for $42, or I can get tickets to see Boys to Men in February for $112. Curated deals make it easier for you to find prices on great seats, and you even get to see the view from your seat before you commit. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Diving deeper into our three must-dos for the Washington Commanders this weekend from our Crossover Thursday episode, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons came through. Always a great conversation. And we figured out, in order to beat the Falcons, Commanders are going to need to stifle Bijan Robinson, Tyler Allgeier, and make Michael Penix Jr. become the passer that, honestly, the Atlanta Falcons don't want him to be yet. Only his second start in the National Football League. And if you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, sign up today to become a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. From there, I'm going to text you all kinds of fun stuff, information, analysis, opinions, news, live text from press conferences, things like that. You're also going to get access to our insider-only exclusive Zoom conferences where we all get together and talk about Commanders football in general, annoying Eagles fans that happen to be friends of yours, things like that. And you're going to be able to send me all your questions, all your thoughts, all your analysis as well. So go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders, become an insider for free for the first 2 weeks. See if you like it. See if you like it. If you do, stick around. Most people who sign up end up sticking around. Not everybody takes advantage of every part of it, but usually everybody finds at least something that they enjoy about the program. So big shout out to all the insiders who are already part of it and the ones who keep signing up as we go through this experience. The second thing that the Washington Commanders have to do or must do in order to guarantee a win this weekend is to stifle Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson, one of the best running backs in the National Football League. I don't know if I put him up there as the best, obviously. Still a lot of room to grow as far as team success and individual success and all that stuff. Saquon Barkley getting MVP conversation MVP nods and all that stuff. I don't think you can put Bijan in that group, but Bijan certainly one of the bright up-and-coming running backs in the National Football League. Tyler Allgeier, nobody to sleep on himself. That two-headed monster there in the Atlanta Falcons backfield certainly can be advantage. And what they need to do is stifle both Bijan and Tyler and basically force the ball into Michael Penix's hand and force the Atlanta Falcons to turn into the passing team that they don't want to be. So we talked about the Washington Commanders ground game and their running back rushing attack specifically. Well, on the flip side of this matchup is the Atlanta Falcons rushing attack, which has averaged 4.2 yards per carry in the month of December and is second in the league in running back rushing yards with a league-leading 132 rushing attempts this month just by their running backs. And, of course, Kirk Cousins is not a rusher. They don't do a lot of wide receiver rushing or whatever. And Michael Penix Jr. also not, the prolific rusher, rushing type of quarterback that we see here in Washington with Jayden Daniels. So it doesn't surprise you that you have a heavy running back run game, but as heavy as it is, just generally speaking, it's one of the heaviest in the National Football League. So that is what the Atlanta Falcons have tried to do. That's what they're going to try to do, is make this about Bijan Robinson and Tyler Allgeier. So if you're the Washington Commanders, specifically on defense, you want to bottle those two guys up as much as possible because that's going to force them into Michael Penix. You bring up 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 6, you put points on the board on the other side, play that complementary football, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Those types of things are going to force the football into Michael Penix Jr.'s hands more than the Atlanta Falcons want it to be right now. Again, 2 starts in. It's not unrealistic for a team to think that a team doesn't want to put it all on the shoulder of their quarterback, especially the throwing shoulder of their rookie quarterback. You look at the Washington Commanders, and Jayden Daniels didn't have the athletic ability that he did in the first 2 weeks of the season this year. There's an argument you can make to say that the Washington Commanders probably would have started 0-2. They started 0-1 against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but probably would have started 0-2 if Jayden didn't have the athletic ability that he has. Still would have been better now than he was then, but you see what I'm talking about. If you're looking at Michael Penix Jr. as a passer, and again, it's only 1 start, but I did look into some of his production, and look, he looks like a rookie quarterback, you know what I mean? But he's got the 7th fewest dropbacks of 34 quarterbacks that took snaps in week 16. So that includes a couple guys like Malik Willis took like 2 dropbacks in his game. So that's counting a guy like that. So 7th fewest, including guys like that. 8th fewest pass attempts last week against the New York Giants defense. 152 intended air yards makes his average depth of target 5.6 yards, which is not good. That would rank half a yard lower than the lowest depth of target average among the top 32 starting quarterbacks in the league. The lowest right now belongs to Tua Tagovailoa, who's got a 6.1 depth of target average. Michael Penix Jr. would be half a yard shy of that mark. So it just kind of shows you really how easy the Atlanta Falcons are trying to make his passing tree. Now that's one game. The more comfortable Michael Penix gets, the more the Atlanta Falcons will get, the more Zach Robinson, the offensive play caller for the Atlanta Falcons, will get with him, and the more that could certainly change, right? So it's one sample size, but clearly the Atlanta Falcons do not want to force Michael Penix Jr. into being the just prolific passer and pass attempt guy that maybe he will be someday, just isn't right now. So when you know that a team doesn't want to do something, the best way to beat them make them do that thing. Best way to make the Falcons do that, stifle Bijan Robinson, stifle Tyler Allgeier, bring up 2nd and 10, bring up 3rd and 8, and do all those things. And then also put points up. Complementary football, right? You want to pressure a team with a rookie quarterback, score points early, score points often, and take the ball out of the hands of the running backs altogether, because you have to pass in order to catch up and catch up quicker. The Washington Commanders defense has allowed more than 7 points in the first quarter this season just once. Before last weekend, they allowed 21 points to Philadelphia Eagles. They allowed less than 12 points for just the 3rd time in 7 weeks in the fourth quarter. So basically, the Washington Commanders defense kind of flipped the script. They allowed a lot of points early, didn't allow a lot of points late, and that's coming up against a playoff contender. Now, with a rookie quarterback making his second start, the hope is that this Washington Commanders defense will get to put together a full 60 minutes of dominant, football, not allowing a lot of production, not allowing a lot of points on the scoreboard. And yes, it'll come against an Atlanta Falcons team that is starting a rookie quarterback again for the second straight week. Yes, there's going to be people who do the but game or put an asterisk on it or whatever they want to do if it happens. But the bottom line is, and if you can go out there and do it, it's kind of like getting out of a batting slump, see the single, hit the single, get yourself out of the slump first, then worry about how or the quality of the hits. Worry about the home runs later. Let's just get some singles. Let's just get you on base. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Let's just get the Washington Commanders 4 quarters of solid defense, low point output, and success. Let's just get it on tape, whether it's against a great team. And it's kind of weird because we're talking about the first place team in the NFC South division, but that's just kind of how weak the NFC South has really been. Let's get it on tape. Let's do it, the right way, and then worry about replicating it against better competition later on down the line. This week, you can do it by forcing the Falcons into being a passing offense. Again, we just kind of talked about that. And to do that, the defense is going to need the offense's help just a little bit. The Washington Commanders have scored double digits in the first quarter just twice this season. But the last time was December 1st against Tennessee Titans, where they put up 21 points in the first quarter alone. So out of the 2 times, the last time it happened, it was fairly recent in memory. Falcons defense has only given up double-digit scoring in the first quarter once this season, but has allowed at least a touchdown in the first quarter 6 times this season. 0 points allowed in the first quarter in each of the last 2 games, so their Falcons defense is going to feel confident, at least to start the game. But the Falcons defense has been most vulnerable in the second quarter games this season, allowing 10 or more points in 7 games this year and at least a touchdown in 3 of the last 5. On the flip side of that, the Commanders offense has double-digit second quarter scoring in 6 games this year and at least a touchdown in every game in the last 3 weeks. So I'm looking for a double-digit second quarter, and I'm looking for at least a touchdown in the first quarter. That gives the Washington Commanders at least 17 points by halftime. If you can score 17 points by halftime, contain Bijan Robinson, stifle Tyler Allgeier, get your own ground game going a little bit, the Atlanta Falcons are going to come out in the second half. They're really not going to have a choice but to start trying to throw the ball around the yard. And that is where guys like Mikey Sainer still, Quan Martin maybe, Frankie Louvu in the intermediate part of the field, maybe Jeremy Chin gets involved, maybe even Benjamin St. Juste, who's going to have to play a little bit more than maybe some of you. I have an inkling wanted him to play this weekend. But with Andrew Wylie out, Jonathan Allen's status up in the air, the Commanders' chances hinge on performances of guys like Cornelius Lucas and Benjamin St. Juste, who are going to need to step up in a big way against the Atlanta Falcons, who have a mediocre pass rush that is getting a little bit better. We'll dive into all of that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Hillsdale College, and Hillsdale College says time is our most precious commodity, so they don't want you to waste it by scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. Surely they're not talking about this content for hours and hours. So how could you spend it more wisely to improve yourself? Well, there's history, there's economics, there's the great works of literature, the meaning of the United States Constitution. Maybe you studied these things in school, maybe you didn't. Even if you did, maybe it's a good time for you to get a refresher, because while time and technology have changed a lot of things, they have not changed the basic fundamental truths about the world and our places in it. So our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering 40 free or more than 40 free courses online, including Constitution 101, the introduction to free market economics, the Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. And they've got a brand new documentary style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. So if you're curious about other forms of government, they got you covered. Go to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked-on to register, hillsdale.edu/locked-on. Wrapping up this week's episode, or today's episode of Locked On Commanders. With Andrew Wylie out, Jonathan Allen's status up in the air, the Commanders' chances hinge on performances of guys like Cornelius Lucas, who are going to need to step up in a big way against the Atlanta Falcons pass rush specifically. And Cornelius Lucas is my X factor for this game, because something that can mess up a game like this, where you're saying Jayden Daniels is on a roll, Brian Robinson Jr., we're going to try to get that run game going again, is a faulty point on the offensive line that the opposing side is able to take advantage of. The Atlanta Falcons defense for about 11, 12 weeks of the season, just zero pass rush. Just pass rush was just non-existent. Well, as of lately, that Atlanta Falcons pass rush has come to life a little bit. I'm not going to say that they're the best pass rush in the NFL in the last 4 weeks or anything like that, but it certainly has gotten a little bit better. And with Andrew Wylie missing this game with a groin injury, was ruled out on Friday, Cornelius Lucas is going to have to step up and make sure that he is not part of that reason the Atlanta Falcons have a better game than expected. Diving into the injury report more that came out on Friday, cornerback Marshawn Lattimore, wide receiver De'Ami Brown, linebacker Jordan McGee, all with hamstring injuries, all out for this game. So that does mean Benjamin St-Juste is going to get significantly more amount of reps. Safety Tyler Owens is also going to be out for this game with an ankle injury. Look, I already know there's going to be some Marshawn Lattimore frustrations. Why would Adam Peters trade for a guy who didn't play for the first, 4 games or so, being on the team? And then here he is. He played 2 games, and now he's right back on the injury report. And I'll just tell you what they've already said. This is about the long-term possibilities for Marshawn Lattimore to impact this team. And I'll tell you, just from talking to trainers, players, other athletes, whatever, hamstring injuries like this, they don't really heal in season. It's really not a matter of getting it fully healed and now you're back on the field. Really what it's about is managing it, right? Now, maybe the Washington Commanders could have played Marshawn Lattimore in a fewer snaps last week, but again, the game flow didn't really allow that. Obviously, they were fighting for the entirety of the game, trying to come back, do all those things. Philadelphia Eagles were targeting Marshawn Lattimore quite a bit, probably, honestly, to test that hamstring and say, hey, are you actually really healthy? The upside to this, I would say, is I don't think Marshawn Lattimore's hamstring injury is necessarily one that's just going to knock him out for the rest of the season. I think this is an error on the side of caution type of situation with Marshawn, because when he re-injured his hamstring, and it is a re-injury of the one that he did come to Washington with, and that's not going to help the aggravation, he was on the sideline getting a massage gun taken to it. You know what I mean? Like, he was doing things in the moment to try to get back on the field. So this isn't the type of injury they're like, okay, dude, you're done. We're shutting you down. It's just not going to happen. No, they were trying to get him back on the field last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, missing this game against the Atlanta Falcons, I know that there's not a lot of support behind Benjamin St-Juste, but look, this team can beat the Atlanta Falcons, right? Any given Sunday and all that stuff, can beat the Atlanta Falcons without Marshawn Lattimore. So I think it's probably more of an erring on the side of caution. And again, remembering that they brought in Marshawn Lattimore not to beat the Falcons in December, but to hopefully maybe beat the Eagles in January, or beat the Packers in January, or beat the Buccaneers in January, right? Win a playoff game, and then going on to even next season, becoming even better, and hopefully getting a fully healthy Marshawn Lattimore back from an offseason of rest. So I know there's going to be some questions about that, some comments there. That's my take on Marshawn Lattimore. We can agree or disagree. Defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, officially questionable to return this weekend. 21-day window to return was open last week, so this is week 2 of that. Next week would be week 3 of it. Does not have to return in this game, but he is questionable to return. Dan Quinn had really high things to say about Jonathan Allen's work ethic and trying to get back. John himself said earlier this week he feels like he could return this week, but obviously that's not purely up to him. The Washington Commanders have up until 4 p.m. Eastern time Saturday to activate Allen or not activate Allen. If they don't activate Allen, they could make a practice squad elevation if they chose to. It cannot be Carl Davis, because Carl Davis can no longer be elevated from the practice squad. He's already been elevated 3 times, so he would have to be signed to the active roster in order to play in a game again. Now, if Allen is activated, which is what I expect will happen, then the Washington Commanders are going to have to release somebody. My expectation then would probably be Phidarian Mathis, unless they put someone on IR. One of these other 5 guys, De'Ami Brown, Jordan McGee, Tyler Owens, if one of them is bad enough to go on IR, then they wouldn't have to release Phidarian Mathis. I don't have an expectation there because I don't know these guys' diagnosis. I will tell you that I saw Tyler Owens today, very visible limp. Not good to see that with that ankle injury. So again, not sure how that's going to play out, but there are some possibilities here. So pay attention Saturday. Insiders, you're going to get text messages from me about all of this stuff. KJ Osborne, I've got some questions from people asking if KJ Osborne is going to be active. Look, teams can only have 48 of their 53 players active on game day. and you add in 2 practice squad elevations, possibly that changes the math, but ultimately at least 5 players from the active roster are going to be inactive on game day. The Washington Commanders already have 5 players ruled out. Andrew Wylie, Marshawn Lattimore, De'Ami Brown, Jordan McGee, Tyler Owens. All 5 of those guys are on the active roster. All 5 of those guys are ruled out already, which basically means everybody else can or could be active for this game. Now, the team might call up Sam Hartman from the practice squad, elevate him to the active roster, then make him inactive on game day for the emergency third quarterback rule, things like that. So they'd have 6 inactive players, but either way, likely means that, yes, KJ Osborne will be active. How many reps he gets, you know what I mean, is really all just dependent on how confident the team, Cliff Kingsbury, Jayden Daniels are in his ability to be a part of the offense. So that's going to be a big part of that. So again, all that going back to my X factor, Cornelius Lucas. The insider non-quarterback X factor is linebacker Frankie Louvu, who got the majority of the votes. Luke McCaffrey and Brian Robinson Jr. tying for second. Also getting some love, Benjamin St. Juste, obviously having to step up, in place of Marshawn Lattimore, is going to get some love there. Jeremy McNichols, Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz. We got some for the pass rush as a whole, just getting after Michael Penix Jr., offensive line as a whole to pave the way for Brian Robinson Jr., some other, things there. Joey Jr. got a vote for dialing up the pass rush. And then insider prediction, the averages, everybody picked Washington. The averages come out to Washington 24, Atlanta 17. My prediction this year, 10-5, straight up money line, just picking the winners, 9-6 against the spread this year. This spread this weekend, Commanders are favored by 4.5 points. The over-under on total points scored is 47.5. I am predicting the Washington Commanders to score 34 points against the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm predicting the Atlanta Falcons to score 10 points. So I am clearly more confident in this game than the insiders are. That's okay. Last time I was this confident, however, Dallas Cowboys. So we'll see what happens. Well, total points scored, I'm projecting is 44 points, which is under the 47.5 over-under at FanDuel, of course. The number one sports book, official sports betting partner of the National Football League. In the next episode of Locked On Commanders, hopefully we're going to be talking about the Washington Commanders clinching a playoff spot. Again, if you're watching the early games, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose the Carolina Panthers, the Commanders are in the playoffs already. But if the Buccaneers beat the Carolina Panthers and the Washington Commanders beat the Atlanta Falcons, the Washington Commanders will secure a playoff spot. Before we have that conversation, if you got any questions or comments, all you got to do is text me directly. Become a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders. You can talk to me through text, and you can talk to me from the stadium. Insiders, we're going to do our pregame Zoom from Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland. It's going to be cold, but I'm going to go ahead and brave it for you. We'll go into the stadium seats. We'll sit down, and we will have a conversation before the game kicks off. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. The madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then in the afternoon, stop by with Tony Wiggins for the barbershop vibe and some real NFL talk. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Everydayers, thanks for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. And until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind. And I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.